Primetime Sports with Scott Alexander is underwritten by Task Performance.
Crescent City Steakhouse, a true neighborhood restaurant operated by the Vojkovic family since 1934, is the oldest steakhouse in the city of New Orleans. Serving only hand-cut, prime-aged, corn-fed beef for over 80 years, Crescent City Steakhouse has become a dining destination for both die-hard locals and adventurous travelers who seek traditional, timeless New Orleans cuisine. Crescent City Steakhouse, 1001 North Broad, on the corner of St. Philip, in the heart of New Orleans.
Hey New Orleans, get ready for some rugby. There's a new pro sports team in town, and it's NOLA Gold, bringing world-class rugby to the Crescent City. The game is fast, the hits are hard, the fan experience is for real. Season tickets, lifetime tickets, and game day passes are all available at nolagoldrugby.com. I'm John Goodman, and I'll see you in the scrum.
Well, here's the bottom line. It's funny that you say that. Let me tell you. Hey, good evening, and welcome to Primetime Sports. Hey, I'm your host, Scott Alexander, and springtime is upon us, hence the jacket. Hey, by the way, the Masters is next weekend. Like I say, it's my favorite time of the year. Major League Baseball's begun. NBA playoffs, they're looming right now, and the Final Four begins this upcoming weekend. And guess what? For the first time ever, that I can remember at least, I have 0 Final Fours left. I have in my bracket, I have nothing left in the Final Four. There's no Duke. There's no Tennessee. There's no Gonzaga. You saw them there. No North Carolina. All of them are out. Hey, the only number 1 seed left are the Virginia Cavaliers. Remember, Michigan State is now the only 2 seed. And how about Texas Tech? They just shocked Gonzaga in that thing. They're in. The biggest surprise was the 5th-seeded Auburn Tigers. They're riding the wave of winning the SEC tourney. They beat basketball blue bloods, Kentucky in the Elite Eight, North Carolina in the Sweet 16, and Kansas in the round of 32. Are you kidding me? All that after taking out Tennessee in the SEC tournament final. And that leads us to our LSU Tigers. They had a nice showing in this year's tourney. You got to remember, just 2 years ago, they were 2-16 in conference. They went to 16-2 this year. They're the champions of the SEC, and they won 2 games in the tourney. You can't doubt them for that or fault them. It was a tough Friday against Michigan State, but they're all tough. Hey, NOLA Gold, they're still in first place despite losing on the last play of the match. An excruciating loss on a penalty. Kind of a bogus call, but they're in first place still despite that loss. Hey, guess what on this show? 1969 World Series hero Ron Swoboda is going to tell us about his entire experience, and of course that catch you see right there in animation. All that next. Lenny Vangilder, Ron Swoboda, right here, Primetime Sports.
The love of my life is a shady lady. Turned me up just to bring me down. Used to be calm, but now she's crazy. I don't mind. She's not the love of my life anymore. Yup. Ha ha. I like this guitar.
Hey, welcome back to Primetime Sports, and I have to tell you, I'm very, very excited about this. Hey, you know, we've had the Archie Mannings, the Carl Mailman Malones, and even in Major League Baseball, Will Clark, Will the Thrill, Johnny Giavatel, the list goes on and on. But I got to tell you, my next guest right here, I've been looking forward to this, and I can't believe we're in our 4th season. This is the first time, but I am very excited. This is the last year of the New Orleans Baby Cakes, maybe. There's been talk about them going to Wichita. They're probably going next year, but who knows? But the fact is this, the guy that's been calling their games for over 2 decades is a guy, if you're under 30, you might not know how cool he is. Besides just being a Renaissance man and a guy about town since he's moved to the Crescent City in 1981, this guy was a 9-year Major League Baseball player, played for the Yankees for a couple, played for the Expos, but he is well known for being an outfielder for the New York Mets, a team that had 7 straight losing seasons. He was a part of a few of those, But then in 1969, it became magical. The Miracle Mets of 1969, they hadn't had a winning record any time during the season until that year. They ended up taking over first place in September, and they rode a wave, winning 35 of 45 games and beating the powerful Baltimore Orioles in the World Series, a team that had 4 20-game starters that had 20 wins at least. So his name is Ron Swoboda, and I'm very excited to have him here. He's known for a thing called the catch, and we'll get into that in a second. But welcome to the show, my friend.
Great to be here, Scott. Thanks for having me.
I mean, I'm thrilled, by the way. People in New Orleans, I want to start there before I get you baseball, because people in New Orleans that are around my age, maybe a little older, maybe some a little younger, will remember you as a sportscaster here. And before I even get to how you got here, because I want to know that, people don't know, unless you kind of remember that era, that you are a guy that is at least partially responsible, if not all responsible, of this term we love now called Who Dat. Who Dat talk about beat them Saints, and you had no idea I was going to bring this up. But talk about that and how it came about, because now the Who Dat Nation is strong across the country. But how did this come about?
Well, when I was sports director at WLAE-TV, Kenny Berthelot was the weekend anchor and reported 3 days during the week. And he would do into a show we did on Monday night, right before Monday Night Football. He'd go out and check in with the high school teams. We did high school, we did Tulane, LSU, and of course the Saints on a Monday Night Football broadcast. And Kenny got on the bus with the St. Aug Purple Knights.
I know it well.
And I'm telling you,
well.
Nobody had really heard this on any popular level. Kenny got on the bus, and the St. Aug football team was, Who Dat said they're going to beat St. Aug? Who Dat? Who Dat? And I went, wow, that's electric. That could go, before they had the word viral.
Right.
It went viral. And Kenny really introduced it on the show, and then it got kind of picked up by some guys, and out came these little Who Dat charms on your thing, and the Saints wrapped themselves around it, and a couple of local guys were trying to own it.
Right.
And nobody could really own it.
Right.
But it became a phenomenon because the Saints were hovering around 500. They were like 5-3 at one point.
Right.
Everybody thought, here we go. And Who Dat got connected to that. Somebody wrote a song,
Yes,
Saints go marching in with the Who Dat chorus. This thing just went crazy.
I just had an epiphany, because as someone that played in the Catholic League against St. Aug, it was daunting to go to their gym, because they would say, Who Dat talk about beat St. Aug? And the other one was, they'd say, when they basically had you beat at the end of the game, they'd say, your hat, your coat, and leave. Take your hat, your coat, and leave. But the Who Dat thing, they were very intimidating. But this is where it all began. Now that leads me back a couple years earlier. Why did you decide on New Orleans? You had been playing baseball. I knew you were a broadcaster in New York City.
I started in New York
Right.
as a broadcaster right off the field with the. Actually, I got released in the spring of '74 from the Braves. I had played 2.5 years for the Yankees. We're going backwards
Yeah,
now.
sure, right.
And then half a season with Montreal, and then 6 years with the Mets.
Right.
So my baseball career was over, and I had no clue what I was going to do. I had done a video piece with a guy named Dave Marish, who was a senior reporter on Ted Koppel's Nightline for years. And Marish, when he was working at WCBS, came down with a crew and filmed my last spring with the Braves
Right.
in West Palm Beach. And turned out to be my last spring. I got released, and the piece was amazing, and it made WCBS, who was looking for a sports guy, think maybe he could sit down there and do this thing as a former athlete. That was the genesis of the whole thing, and I end up doing, when you add it all up, here in New Orleans, out in Phoenix for 3 years, up in Milwaukee, but mostly here in New Orleans. I did 20 years of local television sports.
That's crazy.
Very fortunate fellow.
And you call in the Baby Cakes games with Tim Grubbs. We're going to get that into another
Sure.
segment. We're going to bring you back. But the crazy thing you just said, West Palm Beach, that was where you ended it, and that's kind of where I began. I did 14 years with the Braves. 10 of those we do spring training in West Palm,
Yes.
and then they moved on to Orlando. But That's small world stuff because you ended and I started. But by the way, you have a book about this amazing catch you had, and we have some shots of this catch in the World Series. I believe it was Game 4, and that's a game that kept it from them taking the lead, and they ended up being a tie game and going to overtime, extra innings, and they ended up Mets winning that, which is pivotal to this. But this catch, in fact, I was having pizza the other day, and somebody was talking about the catch, and there was a trivia thing they had been in, and I said, I immediately said Ron Swoboda, and these were young guys, and they're like, no, Willie Mays. I'm like, okay, Willie's basket catch was
1954.
phenomenal. Against Vic Wirtz, hit the ball, correct? The
Vic
Detroit
Wirtz,
Tigers.
who was a Baltimore Oriole
Right.
in 1954. I saw Vic Wirtz hit the only home run he ever hit for the Orioles that year. He got traded to Cleveland.
I mean, we could talk all day about
Yeah,
this. I know.
yeah.
But your catch, I told these youngsters, I said, this is the catch. And here's a book coming out June 11th. June 11th, and I cannot wait. It's a memoir of the Miracle Mets and more. And Ron Swoboda talks about his memories of this, and I can't wait for the book signing. I can't wait for anything you do because I'll be all over this because one of my favorite players of all time, and I was at his 300th victory in New York City when he was pitching for the Chicago White Sox against the Yankees, was your star pitcher, Tom Seaver, who is part of this Miracle Met team. Keep in mind, people, this team had not won, didn't have a winning record ever until like May. They got 500 in May of 69. They started in 62, correct?
We were a lot more renowned for losing 100 games. I played on a bunch of teams that lost 100 games, including my rookie year with Casey Stengel in 1965. So we lost 2 or 3 years of 100 games. In 1969, we won 100.
How amazing. And by the way, this is a team that also started, I think, as an expansion team in 62.
Yes.
And I believe there were 40
they lost
42
120. That's still the major league record for incompetence.
Oh, the Tigers didn't overtake that one year?
They did not.
They
had
close.
a good shot at it, and I
close.
was rooting against them because I think this is a record that the Mets earned and should remain in perpetuity. I hope no one ever breaks 120 losses. And keep this in mind. They lost 120 and didn't play 2 games because it was irrelevant to the race and they got rained out. Yeah,
well,
didn't make them up.
There's a shot of your fellow outfielders in the World Series year.
Tommy Agee, Cleon Jones, and yours truly. And I'll tell you what, Art Shamsky and I actually platooned in right field.
Yeah.
Those guys played every day.
Your memories of that year, because I mean, you go into the season. We all have, hope springs eternal in the spring, right?
Sure.
And you think, hey, this is going to be our year. Every athlete, if they're worth their salt, should think, hey, this is a year. But in reality, what were your thoughts going into the season, knowing that y'all hadn't had a winning season, and then where you ended up?
Well, I'll tell you what. Going into spring training, I think everybody felt like we were developing some good young pitching. And Tom Seaver was one of them. Jerry Koosman, another.
Yes, Jerry Koosman. Nolan Ryan.
Jim McAndrew, just spent some time with him in New York at a promotion. They're bringing the 69 guys together, but Gary Gentry, Tug McGraw.
Tug McGraw, Tim's daddy.
There's some pretty good young arms, and we felt like we're going to be better. Now, how much better? Well, Gil Hodges, our manager, said this team can win 85 games. And we went, everybody looked at one another and went, us? Hodges was trying to set the bar a little high, 85 games.
And y'all won 15 more.
We won 15 more than that. And, into June of that year, we were bubbling around 500. So that's not 85 wins, okay? That's a little below 85 wins.
Yes,
and we were going nowhere. In the spring, the Mets had talked trade with the Braves.
Okay.
The Braves wanted to move Joe Torre, a serious top-level, quality power hitter.
Yeah.
They wanted to get into that young pitching, and the Mets said, no, we don't know yet. And my theory is, without being part of the decision process, is that they weren't going to let anything happen to their pitching before they had a little better idea about it and watch these guys work in the big leagues. So they don't make that deal. Into June, we're just kind of bubbling along at 500, and we win 11 in a row, starting against the West Coast teams at Shea Stadium.
Yeah.
We went on the road to the West Coast against those same teams, the Dodgers, San Diego, and the Giants, and we win 11 in a row. And I think it got I think it got the leadership's attention. That's when they made Don Clendenin deal. Clendenin was unhappy in Montreal. They're trying to trade him to Houston. He did not want to go back there. They work out a deal where he was in good shape, and we work out a 5-for-1 deal with Montreal. We give him one good pitcher, Steve Renko, and the other 4 guys were guys.
Right.
So Renko substantiates the deal. We got a power-hitting right-handed first baseman in Clendenin who platooned with Ed Kranepool, and platooning was a lot of what helped make us a better team.
Yeah.
But in he comes towards the end of June. And all of a sudden we got some pop that we didn't have, and we still have those arms.
I mean, you had the defense with Bud Harrelson over there at shortstop.
But he could play.
I mean, you look through this team, and you're talking about this is the 50-year anniversary of this great thing.
Yes.
And I'm gonna go one step further because the '86 Mets team. I remember I wore that Mets hat for about 3 years. I loved the team.
Yeah,
they were a little brash. They just.
Oh, they were rowdy. I mean, they were raucous. Okay.
And they were favorites, unlike y'all. They were kind of like, hey, we have Strawberry, we have Gooden, we have some studs.
They set the stage in the early to mid '80s. They set the stage.
Oh yeah,
a little
trust
bit.
me, that was my college years, and I remember it very well. But one thing I do remember is everybody remembers Keith Hernandez from that team being on Seinfeld, and talking about I'm Keith Hernandez, and but you guys, including yourself, we're on Everybody Loves Raymond, and I remember this episode. It's a phenomenal episode. That's obviously the cast and crew of the show. And here you guys are. Yep. And I see you guys. I think you're second from the right, correct? There he is right there.
Tug McGraw. A couple of guys are no longer with us. Tommy Agee was there, no longer with us. Don Clendenin, no longer with us. And that, as we celebrate 50 years, the impact of that mortality strikes you a little hard, and it gets you where you live.
It does, man. But that moment of being on a TV show, it's kind of cool. Obviously, you've been on a big stage. You played in New York.
This thing has kept playing. I'm still getting a modest residual from this thing. It keeps getting shown this episode.
Oh, every episode you get a little something extra. I love it.
I get, maybe a couple $100 a year that I didn't do anything for. So it's like, imagine if you were a principal on that thing, and
right. Yeah, you do a little better than that.
It's crazy. It didn't go away, and people still go, "Hey, I just saw you on Everybody Loves Raymond," and I'm like, "Yeah, how cool is that?"
How cool is that?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And here's some of the names you just mentioned. You're part of this: Bud Harrelson, Cleon Jones, Tug McGraw. This is 4 years earlier when you guys were all rookie all-star, not all-star team, but like they called the rookie all-star teams or whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, were we stars? We were stars. We weren't all stars at that point. But Cleon Jones in 1969 was fighting for the batting title. And he was, with Pete Rose and I think Rico Cardi, I believe. But he had figured out how to hit.
You're a kid from Baltimore. You grew up there. You went to Maryland for a year. But when you're playing in New York City, I mean, listen, the Jets, they're about to do their Super Bowl thing. Obviously, the Knicks were about to do their World Championship team. You guys got it done a little bit before them, like a year.
Yeah.
I mean, this is New York City. What is it like being a champion in New York City?
Well, I'm going to tell you something. I was a kid growing up in Baltimore, so New York was that, like, shining, glowing thing on the hill, And
Absolutely.
You were like, wow, the big city before it became the Big Apple. Here we are. This actually was a Macy's Day parade. And
a month after you won the World Series.
It was and there's the record album.
The Amazing Mets.
Well, we sung a bunch of songs, and if we sounded like we had too much champagne in us, it's because we did.
It's because we absolutely did.
The day after we won the World Series, we cut this record. It was like sing along with the Mets. It was horrible. But we sold a few of them. And this is, of course, the field after you win the World Series. People go out there and they tore up Shea Stadium. I mean, there are people who still have in their yard a little plot of grass that came from Shea Stadium in 1969.
I love your passion, man. I'm listening to you talk about this. Does this still get you excited to go back and talk about this?
Well, I feel so fortunate to have made it to this point, 50 years down the road in reasonably good shape. I've been lucky enough to work for the Baby Cakes, who used to be the Zephyrs, and it keeps you around baseball, and I've learned an appreciation and love for the game that, when I got dumped out of the game after 9 years in the big leagues, I wasn't in love with the game anymore, but I came around and fortunately was able to do this AAA stuff here in New Orleans, and it's kept me close to the game as the game has evolved and the players have changed with the money and the economics.
But you're around and you love it. Before, we're going to get to baby cakes because I'm going to bring you back, if you don't mind, for another segment.
Yeah, sure.
I have one last thing I want to talk about the Mets. I don't know if y'all even overlapped as teammates, but I know you're close. You were close to a guy that just passed away a year ago because I went to the event after the funeral for Rusty Staub.
Yes.
And I heard you give a speech that was very poignant. There was tears flowing, including my own. And it was very touching. So talk about your relationship with this great New Orleans baseball player.
Well, yeah. I saw Rusty for the first time as a rookie in the Astrodome. Okay, he had been
The Colt 45s.
He was originally a Colt 45, right. but they Colt Patent Firearms challenged their right to use that name, and they became the Astros in the Astrodome. And of course, the Astrodome was an interesting story, and I do get into it in my book a little bit because it was an indoor stadium where they thought they could grow grass by keeping the panels in the roof clear, and then they forgot that if you have steel structure between those clear panels and the bright light coming through, you look up, you can't see the baseball. That's not going to work in a baseball game. And with all the money and development they had, they developed a species of grass that would grow in there. Nobody thought about looking up.
Yeah, right. What about that? Fly balls are coming. I can't see anything.
It was like, Houston, we got a problem. And the problem was the solution was they had to paint over it.
Yeah.
And of course the grass started dying. So I played in '65. Rusty was a right fielder.
Yeah.
And you saw in Rusty, I mean, I'm a right fielder. I looked at a guy and I said, this guy can throw, he can hit. He can do all you need to do to be to be an all-star major leaguer. And then as I came to New Orleans to do sports, Rusty and I became close because his sister Sally and his brother Chuck still live here.
I'm good friends with
Rusty
Chuck.
would come in to ride in Bacchus, every year.
Yeah.
And he'd have a big dinner at his sister's house out in Metairie. And I was lucky enough to get invited with my wife Cecilia. And when Rusty throws a feed,
oh yeah,
he throws a feed, and the sad part was he was starting to.
Yeah.
He had the year before he passed. He really had a bunch of issues.
Yeah.
Heart issues.
Yes.
All kinds of things converged on our boy, and it was just a tough struggle.
Yeah.
It was really.
I had dinner at his brother Chuck's more than a couple times over there in Marcia, and
Yes.
and I know how close they were, and they kept me abreast. You're a Renaissance man. I can't wait to finish this. By the way, Rusty Staub, let me one more thing. Still the only player in Major League history that did 500 hits with 4 different Major League teams. That is amazing. Hey, but who else is amazing? My man sitting right here. We're going to take a break because I'm going to talk about all the other sports going on right now. LSU basketball, Saints, free agency. What's the future of the Pelicans? Tulane's new basketball coach. We're going to have another guy making his debut on this show, Lenny Vangilder. That's another guy I cannot believe that I haven't had him on yet, but he's going to talk about all that. But I'm bringing my man Ron Swoboda back because we're going to talk about his time with the Pelicans. That's the old minor league team.
Yes.
With the Zephyrs, and of course now the Baby Cakes, and then what they're going to look forward to this season as well. Stay tuned right here on Primetime Sports.
Primetime Sports with Scott Alexander is underwritten by Task Performance.
The owners of the Delachaise Wine Bar on St. Charles Avenue have opened up their newest creation uptown on Maple Street called Chez Delachaise, a new local wine bistro featuring a larger menu of small and large plates, a brighter atmosphere, and full table service. Additionally, patrons can enjoy a large patio out front as well as an extensive wine list offering selections from around the world. It's Chez Delachaise, 7708 Maple Street between Carrollton and Broadway.
Rock and roll will never die. It's old New Orleans, my oh my. Come on, baby, let's go rock and roll at the city lane. All night, let's roll, let's rock and roll. Baby, do the rock and roll. At the Mid-City Lanes, the home of rock and roll.
Embracing New Orleans soul with style. and fashion wear from NOLAshirts.com. Show off your love for one of America's unique cities with shirts, belts, and hats in a variety of colors and styles. NOLAshirts.com proudly celebrates the culture and embodies the spirit and determination of people from the Crescent City. The tradition lives on at NOLAshirts.com.
Hey, welcome back to Primetime Sports. Got to thank Ron Swoboda. How about that? Going back in history, those amazing Mets, the Miracle Mets of 1969. Hey, we're not done with Ron, though. We're going to come back, talk a little bit about the Baby Cakes and maybe their final season here in New Orleans, and just talk about his run through his 25 years or so calling games with the Zephyrs, Baby Cakes, etc. But right now, we're going to talk about everything else going on in the world of sports in New Orleans. None better than my next guest, Lenny Vangilder. I cannot believe this is his debut performance right here on Primetime Sports. When I first moved back to town 7 years ago, I don't remember who it was, but somebody says, you got to get to know Lenny Vangilder. He's the guy that knows everybody and knows everything about what's happening in the Crescent City. And speaking of Crescent City, that is the site, the name of his new website. I shouldn't say new. It's a newer name because there used to be sportsnola.com. Before that, it was NOLA-NewOrleans.com. But the last couple of years, it's been CrescentCitySports.com along with Ken Trahan and, of course, Jude Young. They kind of do everything over there. Here he is, Lenny Vangilder. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Good to be with you. I think my invitation just got lost in the mail. That's what it was.
The invitation was lost in the mail. Finally, you found it.
Exactly.
Well, here's the thing.
The mail's a little slow these days.
It is slow. I remember the first time somebody said, man, yeah, Lenny Vangilder is the guy that comes up with these obscure stats. Because I used to be known for that at Fox in Atlanta. I'd throw crazy things up with the Braves games. When did you get your passion for all that?
Goes back to high school, probably. I started as a statistician working in my high school days at Rummel. You were across town at one of those other Catholic League schools at that time.
Yeah.
But that turned into a chance to be able to work as a student at Tulane. I spent more than 20 years on the PR side, working at UL Lafayette for a couple of years, then got back to New Orleans, Tulane, spent 11 years at the fairgrounds. And now I've kind of jumped sides of the fence. I'm the one that's now more
You're
generating the
stories.
content
Right,
as opposed to
right.
pitching the stories out there.
You like this side of it?
It's fun. It's certainly different, and you wear a lot of hats when you do it. I mean, the different roles we've been in. We talk about Crescent City Sports are really a three-headed monster with Ken, Jude, myself, and we all do a little bit of everything. We all have our strength. We all have our lane that we drive in, but we can change lanes when we have to as well, and we all do a little bit of everything, and that's how we make it
You
work.
even have a newer lane right here. This ball right here, of course, that's NOLA Gold Rugby. You've done a great help for us, putting everything together, helping us with the media guides, the weekly updates going in, and now we're going to even start using them as programs, but we do appreciate that. What do you think about the start so far?
I tell you, it's an entertaining sport. I had a chance to get out there a couple of times last year and watch some things, and now to see things even ramped up more in 2019, the success on the field. Look, we know New Orleans. Everybody loves a winner.
We love a winner here, baby.
That's it. And you got a winner right now. You got 3 more chances to get out and see this team this year at home, at least in the regular season. There's maybe some playoffs. We'll see how that plays out. But certainly that's exciting to see what this team has been able to do this year.
They are like the Saints of the MLR, leading scoring team. They put up a lot of points, and they are in first place still, despite the excruciating 34-33 loss on the last play of the game. Another Rams-like call, but we'll skip that. No more sour grapes. Let's talk about some pleasant things happening in the Crescent City. The Saints off season. They had the bad news after obviously what happened in the playoffs with the Rams. We don't need to get into that. But man, they always seem, the last couple of years, they seem to get these under the radar free agents like DeMario Davis last year, who ends up being one of the stars of the defense. What do you see that they've done in free agency this year?
Well, I think you have to look like the Jared Cook move in terms of getting a tight end that can stretch the field a little bit. Is he going to be Jimmy Graham 2.0? No, I don't think at this point in his career he's going to be. But still, what he does is something that was missing from this Saints offense last year.
Absolutely.
Be able to, take something down the seam. Certainly, you've got Michael Thomas and you've got Alvin Kamara, but you've got to have that third piece to the passing game that really wasn't there last year. And you hope a guy like, Traquan Smith continues to develop and You think he will improve, but you've got to
Maybe
add
even
pieces.
Cameron Meredith, who knows?
Exactly. Hopefully he's fully healthy.
But what
as
he
well.
does is what you said. He goes down the seam, and that's another player for the defense to account for, which means the Kamara's coming out of the backfield might want to have one less guy on him, or Michael Thomas might not get the triple team. So he's obviously going to get a lot of attention. So, you couldn't stretch the field as much. I mean, like I said, you said he's not going to be maybe Jimmy Graham, but still, he's a guy that you haven't had because you know Kobe Fleener couldn't catch a cold at all, and he paid him a lot of money. And obviously, Ben Watson, a great locker room presence, decent on the field, but he was getting up in age. The positions, the ones I think are going to be interesting. Malcolm Brown, we all know what happened to Sheldon Rankins with the torn Achilles. You got Malcolm Brown to replace him, and theoretically, Mario Edwards from Florida State, who was an early second-round pick with the Raiders, ended up playing some with the Giants as well. But you got him to theoretically replace Alex Okafor. So talk about maybe what those guys can provide for the Saints team on the defensive side.
Well, you've always got to have pass rush. That's no matter what. You've got to generate some kind of pass rush. In a perfect world, you like to be able to do it with your 4 guys up front so you're not having to send extra guys. Passing games in the NFL, you see the numbers year after year after year. You see how they change the rules year after year after year, trying to make this more of an offensive sport. The numbers were off the charts this year. You look at the 4 teams that made it to the conference championship games, they were the 4 highest scoring teams in the NFL.
Yes, they were.
So that is where the game is continuing to go, where it's continuing to trend, and you've got to do what you can to defend that. And the best way to defend that is to be able to rush the passer with 4 guys up front and be able to drop 7 into coverage, or occasionally be able to blitz a linebacker as a 5th. But you've got to have linebackers who can cover. Davis was outstanding at being able to do that last year. And guys up front who can get to the quarterback.
Back to the offensive side of the ball, to me, one of the top 5 players, easy for the last 3 or 4 years, has been Max Unger. I don't want to say shocking retirement, but I think it was highly surprising for most of the Who Dat Nation. What do you think about him and the replacement? Because they didn't waste any time. Within 24 hours, they had Nick Easton signed, former Minnesota Viking who's played a little guard, who's played some center, obviously, and he prefers the center position. How is he going to be replacing, I'm not going to say a legend, but a very, very good football player, Max Unger?
What I will say is this. First of all, it tells me that the fact that you made a move that quickly tells me they knew this was coming.
You knew it was coming.
Secondly, I'm not sure you totally replace a Max Unger, but that's a very good replacement, if you will, a piece to be able to put in there. Was certainly better than anybody you had on the roster. And you've got some younger guys who have a chance to do some things and be contributors down the road. Offensive line is a position, first of all, you need continuity among your linemen, and you need guys to be able to stay healthy. And that was what the Saints were able to do offensively with piecing that offensive line together with tape. It seemed like, moving guys around, and just a total lack of continuity that you had on the offensive line last year to do what they were able to do and generate the numbers they were able to generate. That just makes how valuable Drew Brees and Sean Payton are even that much more. And oh, by the way, Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara were getting double teamed almost every time either one of them went down the field because you didn't have compliments to them. It's extraordinary what you're able to do.
And the last one I want to talk about is, hey, listen, we all would, if it was an either-or situation, you probably want to keep Mark Ingram, right? But his agent kind of threw something out that I think the Saints were offended by, and they were like, hey, we can't match that at all, so we're just going to go ahead and do what's best for the organization. They don't want Kamara to be a full-time guy, so they went out and got Latavius Murray. Do you feel there's a drop-off at all here?
It's hard to say. I mean, look, that was a good 1-2 punch there, and you've got still. I think that I'll say this about anytime you go into free agency and try to bring somebody in. As we've seen, you can have numbers, you can put things down on paper, but at the same time, what is it that you're actually bringing when you get out there, and can you mesh in with the group? For every Demario Davis, like you said, there's a Kobe Fleener out there. There are guys that you think are going to be big contributors that don't turn out to be anything. So pump brakes a little bit. Let's just wait and see how things develop during the course of camp.
Yeah, Saints had that 13 out of 14 games where they won. And obviously the last game they didn't really care about against Carolina. Great finish. Hopefully they'll use that loss to the Rams as motivation for next season. Hey, let's switch gears. Speaking of motivation, it looks like Anthony Davis hasn't had a whole lot lately. We all know that he's most likely going to be gone by next season. There is some camp out there saying, hey, if they don't get what they want, they might keep him around for a while. What are your thoughts about the future? Let me just make this broad of this New Orleans Pelicans team and organization. Is it just absolutely mandatory that they get a great return for Davis?
I don't know what you're going to get having only 1 year left. There's only so many suitors that are going to be out there to be able to trade for him to provide the assets that you want. But the ones that are out there are intriguing. I mean, obviously, more so Boston than anyone else. And you'd love to see what actually becomes available there when they can make a move once Kyrie Irving's situation changes, and then they're able to take on AD at that point in July. It's possible you could really get a nice return there. The other thing, don't forget about this, at least in the history of this organization, you haven't had a lot of top 10 picks, and that's where it is shaping up to go right now. When you've been able to make a top 10 pick, you look at Chris Paul, you look at Anthony Davis, those have been big-time impact players.
You look at Austin Rivers, not big impact.
Well, but still, there are, for the most part,
if you've had a top 5 pick, you've done well.
Right. At the same, and the other part is this: who's going to be making the decision on which offer is getting taken? Exactly. That's the other big piece. That's the domino that's got to fall first in all of this. I'll be really intrigued.
After watching Texas Tech, I think I like this kid Culver. If they can manage that, I'll be happy. Hey, moving forward, LSU basketball. Well, that was great most of the season. All of a sudden, you had, wow, what just happened here? But you had a team that won the SEC. A team had 16 conference wins out of 18 games. Pretty remarkable. What is the future right here? I mean, we all know the Will Wade situation. We all know a little turmoil at the end. It's kind of in a state of limbo. But what's Lenny Vangilder think is going on right now with the LSU program?
I'll be surprised if there's not a change at this point. Just with everything that's happened, I will be surprised if there's not a change at the top. And then where do you go? Do you feel like, okay, this group in here, the assistants have done a nice job holding things together? Maybe Tony Benford decides maybe you got to give him a shot, or do you just wipe the slate clean and start over and go try to bring somebody in? The good thing that Will Wade did in 2 years' time is really reestablish a vibe inside the PMAC that we haven't seen in a long time, going back to the days of Dale Brown, really. Yeah. And I mean, and look, some good things have happened since then. I know Trent had his years, and obviously, John Brady got 1 year. John Brady got that Final Four team in 06. Yeah. But really, you're talking about an extended, sustained vibe in that building. You're talking about going back to the days of Dale.
No doubt. I mean, I was firmly there in the days of Dale, all through the 80s in college. Obviously, also in law school when Shaq and Chris Jackson were there. But also, I got to tell you this, people forget about Ben Simmons, but there was 2 games when he played that it was rocking. Kentucky when they blew him out by 20, and then that Oklahoma game Buddy Hield. That I think was the turning point of that season because they were number 1, and LSU was beating most of the game, and it was rocking in that place. But bottom line is this, you're right, the vibe has been back on a regular basis, which is rare. So let's move forward to Tulane basketball because you spent a lot of time over there on Oak and Willow, and no, not Oak, Ferret and Willow, both those spots. Uptown New Orleans where Tulane is. Well, they got a guy with a lot of excitement. Not to take anything away from Mike Dunleavy, but not quite the personality of the guy they brought in from Georgia State, Ron Hunter. Everybody might remember in 2015 when he had the big upset, that game against Baylor when they were 14-3, and Ron Hunter and his son RJ had the big tournament. But what is your take on this hire?
I think it's a good hire. I think you needed to go get somebody with significant head coaching experience, which he brings to the table. He really played the press conference well. Now, remember this about the press conference. It was open to the public. It was open to the players.
Well, there's a quote I love right there. I'm
not used to losing. He doesn't want to lose.
And I don't want to get used to losing ever. And not only are we going to win, we're going to win big and we're going to win, consistently win.
Now, the one thing you don't see up there is he was promising an NCAA tournament bid next year, and I'm not sure. I think that's a little bit of a reach.
Wow.
But this is a team that went 4-27 last year.
It next year. Okay.
Yeah, he's ready to go next year. And I think he's immediately starting a rivalry with Houston. Okay.
I heard that too.
He called Calvin Sampson grandpa. So let's see what happens there. But look, I think they're going to improve. Okay, you like what he's done at IUPUI. You like what he's done at Georgia State. How much of that is he capable of doing at Tulane, and how quickly is he capable of doing it at Tulane? Let's remain and see. I think the big thing he's got to do, he's going to bring a lot of people with him from Georgia State, but he's got to bring somebody with that Louisiana experience, with that New Orleans experience, hopefully with that Tulane experience, to be able to fill out that staff, to give him that local angle.
Hey, by the way, since we're on the topic, I know you like baseball as well. The local baseball teams, LSU, it always seems this way. We always put them on life support, and then they come back and do something. That's why I never worried about LSU. All right, you know they obviously they were 17-9, and they had to have something go their way, and it did. The bats woke up the last two games against Mississippi State. They scored over 20 runs, I believe, in those two games against the number 2 team in the country. What is your take on the future of LSU baseball going forward?
They needed that Mississippi State series in a big way. And you're right. I've followed college baseball since long before it was in. Okay, going back to the early '80s when I really started paying attention to it. But they needed that in a big way. You go back and look at last year. They struggled immensely on the road. I don't think they won an SEC series on the road. They lost a ton of games in the middle of the week away from the box. They needed a road series win. When you figure how RPI is calculated, that's what you need. You look what happened. They jumped up in the top 10 in RPI this week. And look, still a lot of baseball to play, but that's what's going to get you. The reason there was no baseball in the postseason in Baton Rouge last year and LSU got sent on the road was because they couldn't win on the road. And they win at home, but they needed those road wins to build that RPI up there.
By the way, your father, a legendary bowler in this town, well known. Bowling is a fun sport, but it's also a professional sport in a lot of circles. You guys are doing something with that. Tell me about it.
Crescent City Sports, we're thrilled that for the first time we're able to live stream an LHSA championship event. We've done some early round stuff, but this Thursday, April the 4th, we will have coverage of the semifinals and finals of the LHSA Bowling Championships from Baton Rouge, from All-Star Lanes.
What time?
Starts at 11. And then there'll be a break, and then the finals will follow a little bit after 1 o'clock probably. A lot of local interest. 2 New Orleans area teams, Brother Martin Academy of Our Lady, are both in, and they're both defending champions as well. Brother Martin is a dynasty in bowling, by the way. They've not lost a regular season match in 6 years.
Brother Martin's a dynasty.
How about that?
Man, those Crusaders are doing something good. I was about to say something about the Crusaders when we were talking about the center position. I said, maybe Will Clapp might get an opportunity there. Who knows with the Saints? Hey, by the way, we give gifts over here. First things first, I got to pimp the rugby team. You know, hey, they got 3 more home games, as you said. Yeah. April the 13th being the next one. Then we have May 11th, May 18th. This is fabulous. Go call 50 Rugby. That's 504-50 Rugby. You can get great seats. They're fun. It's a fun time. Ask Bobby Hebert, T-Bob Hebert. They had a blast last time they went. Couldn't stop talking about it. Also, you can go to nolarugby.com, and the gear is cool. You see that logo? I guess it's over here. The logo right there. It's got great stuff. It's wonderful, but we don't stop there with our gifts. You know, we got these shirts from Task, and if you're familiar with Tulane, you know, the high school All-American who became an All-SEC player, Al Andrews. That's right. Tulane was in the SEC.
Back when.
Here you go.
Thank you,
Feel that softness.
That's outstanding.
You got it? And then, you know, go get you a few glasses of wine, my friend, over at Shays, Della Shays. That's uptown. You should know where that is. On Maple.
I will find it.
Between Carrollton and Broadway.
No doubt.
There's my man, Lenny Vangilder. I can't thank you enough. We got to do this more often.
Absolutely.
All right. Hey, Bud, it's great to see you again.
Good to see you as well. I appreciate it.
Hey, we're going to go back to our guy. That's right, Ron Swoboda. This is a living legend, people. I mean, listen, he was on the Mets team that won a World Series. How many times do I get that in there? Yeah, I've had Will Clark. I've had Johnny G. Vitella. We've had some great guys like that. But not World Series champions, maybe a World Series runner-up, but not a champion. He's coming right back to talk about your local team, the Baby Cakes, right here on Primetime Sports. Hey, welcome back to Primetime Sports. I told you we were going to bring him back. And for you local baseball fans, I know you were like, why not talk about the Zephyrs and the Baby Cakes? They've been around for a quarter century. The rumor is that the Baby Cakes are gone after this year. Welcome back, Ron Swoboda, first of all. That was so much fun for me. And thanks to Lenny Vangilder for all that fun talk we just had.
Yes.
But let's talk about your experience. I know you did the local news, the sports guy for WVUE for several years. And then you started, okay, this new team's coming to town. The minor leagues hadn't been around in years. I know they had a brief stint in the late 70s, and I know back in the day, the Pelicans were around. But when it came around, how did this come about, you getting the job and wanting to do this?
I just, Kenny Trahan, one of our sports guys here, for a long, long time, I got connected with him and asked him if he needed a color guy, and I got the job with Kenny. He was the first guy I worked with
calling the games.
On the Zephyrs when we were out at the University of New Orleans when they just got started.
Right. So how many years did they play there before going to the new Shrine on Airline?
It seems like it was 3 or 4, and then they built what was Zephyr Field, and now we just call it the Shrine on Airline. But it was an interesting transition, and it looks like it's coming to an end after this year.
Yeah.
The plans are they're going to move to Wichita and be kind of one of the big dogs there.
Right,
and I think something that they have a hard time doing here.
Yeah, and you know what? It's in New Orleans. I'm just going to say this. I was with the Braves for 14 years doing work, and it's hot in Atlanta, but it's really hot when you're sitting in a day game here in the middle of the July or August, or even a night game sometime. And I just think even the hardest core baseball fan has a tough time making it through a 9-inning game in that stadium.
Maybe what we need is a bigger swimming pool.
Yes.
Area.
The
That
swimming
wouldn't hurt,
pool's
huh?
right there. How about that? That's good producing, right? You say it.
He's on it,
up.
man. That's on it.
No, but talk about your experiences. I mean, you're a baseball guy. I mean, you played in the major leagues. You were in the World Series. You love the sport. I mean, talk about this 20 or 25-year run, I guess, doing the minor leagues.
It's interesting. You get to see guys who come through, and you look at them and you say, "Wow."
He's got something.
You spot them because the guys that are prospects almost have kind of a glow around them. I remember when Alex Bregman, who we knew from LSU, he came through here with the Houston organization, and you just saw a kid, even when he was struggling, looked like he was hard to dent. His attitude, you're not going to dent it.
Right.
He played the same way, same looking at bat, same head up, ready to go. And you said, this guy's going to be okay. Because you know he can play, and you know he will come around, and you know a little adversity is not going to blow him away.
And he's only in his 3rd year in the majors after a great career at LSU, and he just signed a $100 million deal. Not so bad. Not so bad. You're like, why did not play this era? But also on his team, George Springer came through, recent World Series champions at Astros. And let's go even further. Buster Posey played against you. This guy's got 3 World Series, and remember those even-numbered years, 10, 12, and 14. And even more recently, the Chicago Cubs. I mean, you have all those guys like
they
Rizzo.
ran a whole bunch of guys through. I remember seeing Bryant,
Chris Bryant,
Rizzo, and
Javi Baez.
Baez came through, and we looked like the little kids trying to play the big kids. They wasted us, and it wasn't fun to play against them.
Right there.
I don't think we saw Jake come through here. They picked him up from outside their organization, but you knew that the Cubs had something that was building because you saw them all in AAA.
Yep. He actually did play here, but he didn't play for that organization. You're right. But he ended up coming through here. But, hey, by the way, I mean, just your memories in general, is there one that stands out for you? Like, I mean, and perhaps maybe winning the title or whatever. What stands out for you, like, being announcing?
I remember the run we had of about 8 years with the Astros.
Yes.
When they were here. And Berkman played here, and a couple of guys that you thought could really play. Roy Oswald came through. He pitched 2 games for us, and I remember Jim Hickey was the pitching coach, and I said, wow, this guy's going to be fun. He says, don't fall in love with him. I said, what do you mean?
He's
He said, he's not going to be here long.
Right.
And he was right, he was right.
I mean, that's another team that made it to the World Series.
Sure.
I mean, goodness, they didn't win it, but Roy Oswald, Burke.
Those are the building blocks, and that's the exciting thing about it. When you start seeing some talent there, and talent that looks like they can make the transition, that's when you go, this club has something going, because you build young now. It's the right way to do it. It's the most economical way to do it. And we hope that, the Baby Cakes are showing some younger guys that are going to come up. And we had a good time. We missed Yelich when he was with them, because when he was with Marlins, he jumped over us.
Yes, he did.
He went right to the big leagues like Giancarlo Stanton. The only time we saw those guys was when they came here and played an exhibition game, and you stood next to Giancarlo Stanton when he was with the Marlins, and you went, "This is a different human being. This is a big fella."
It's like when you see Shaq, you're like, "Hold on, this guy's different." Hey, by the way, does this still excite you going into a season?
Yeah.
I mean, it's still
it's quality baseball, because these guys are all, in this day and age, there's a lot of up and back. So, especially a team like the Marlins. They already took Pete O'Brien off the AAA roster. He was set to play with us. They had an injury to Cooper, who's always injured. And next thing you know, I'm watching Pete O'Brien batting against the Mets, the other night on Major League Baseball channel. And he's a guy I loved here. He had a great year for us, finishing up last year when they picked him up. And he went up to the big leagues and showed well, but he did not make the team out of spring training.
What made you stay in New Orleans for so many years? You had options. Yeah. I mean, you've now been here for almost 4 decades. I mean, think about that. Now this is your town. I mean, you're a Baltimore native. Obviously, you've been in New York and you're a star there, but you're here.
My wife worked at Charity Hospital for years and years and retired there as a speech pathologist. She worked with people with head injuries and strokes as it affected.
She's a saint then. She's a saint. Yes.
Yeah, she is an amazing, and my hero, by the way. But I always joke that she understands people with brain injuries, which helped our marriage. She understood my condition.
Okay, I got it. All right.
But it gets a laugh. And anyway, she had that job and was solid here. My kids went to Rummel High School, my 2 boys, and I just love this city.
Yeah.
When I first got here, the late sets at the jazz clubs, Snug Harbor and elsewhere, Tyler's Beer Garden, another good one.
Cafe Brazil,
the late set was 11 o'clock. Now the late set is 10 o'clock. But I would go out and hang out with James Rivers and George Porter. And
George Porter, legend.
Torkanowski, the piano player. I love these people, and we have world-class musicians here that I was privileged to go sit after doing the evening news and watching them play. James Singleton, the bassist. And
love it.
Johnny Vodakovich, the drummer extraordinaire.
Still phenomenal. Still playing regularly over at the Maple Leaf.
But my real close buddy was David Torkanowski, because he's a great Saints fan, and the guy's been can play everything. He is, and he knows the music scene, and whenever I'm looking for something or he's doing something, I always want to see.
I hate to even stop you, because I could go on forever, but this is the end of the show. Yeah. We do give gifts. Your wife, by the way, 53 years of marriage. Congratulations to that. Here we go. Shays de la Shays, a restaurant uptown. You're a Renaissance man. Oh, cool. You love wine, I'm pretty sure. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's one of the great wine places in town. It's an offshoot of de la Shays. That's on Maple, between Carrollton and Broadway. And I'm going to tell you this. If you find a softer, more comfortable workout shirt, or just one to wear around the house or go sleep in, you tell me, because this is bamboo cotton material. It's called Task Performance.
That is nice.
And I'm going to have you 2 tickets for the NOLA Gold Rugby. This is the 3rd major league team in town.
There we go.
And this team is on a roll, first place. There is rumors that they might be going to your stadium next season. But the fact is this is a great thing. I'm going to get you and your wife tickets. These are real men. These are real men. Woo. Give you that schedule. And also, I want to plug your book one last time. Here it is right here. It's called Here's the Catch. And this is coming out in about 2 months or so.
June 11th, I have a signing date at Octavia Books at 6 p.m.
Place.
That's a long way down the road, but...
I'll promote it when it gets close.
Thank you.
How about that?
Thank you.
This has been
You're
a pleasure.
awesome.
This has been a true pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Ron Swoboda, I'm glad some of you younger folks got to see another side of the guy that you hear on the radio calling the baseball games here in town. Hey, so many people to thank. Everybody over at the Baby Cakes, of course, and all the people at CST and WLAE. Will Hill, the producer, does a yeoman's job, yeoman's work every single week. The Redhead Tsunami. We have Lexi, we have Naila, and of course, my intern Hunter. Got to thank them all. Hey, we'll see you next week right here on Primetime Sports.